Dr. Pleites-Hernandez is Assistant Professor of Political Science at UNC Asheville, and as noted in our flyers that we've sent out, Professor Pleites-Hernandez studies minority politics, public opinion, and Congress. He researches and teaches on a number of topics, including media and politics, public policy and administration, and immigration politics and policy in the U.S. One of his recently published works with colleague Dr. Rob Schroed focuses on the impact that personal discrimination has on the political assimilation of Latinx migrants and their U.S.-born children. He's originally from Los Angeles, but he now has deep connections in this area of the world. He has a PhD in political science from the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, an MA in political science from Appalachian State University, and a BA in political science from Mars Hill University. Wow. There you go. And so with that, I will turn the program over to our speaker. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you all for having me. I'm very excited to be here. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. If that changes at any time, let me know, right? My students do it from time to time. All right, so today my talk here, as you've heard, is immigration and citizenship, where we are and how we got to this point, right? This also has my information. I'm happy to talk with anyone if you want to reach out for anything that you heard or anything that you'd like to talk about more. I will make these slides available, and then they can be disseminated for anyone that's interested. Before I actually get too far, I do want to issue a content warning, right? So some of the lecture, some of these parts of the lecture and examples that I'm using has some visuals and language that isn't acceptable, right? But it is used as a way to make a point and talk about that history, right? Whether we like it in the present day or not, it's still our history. So I wanted to preface that. And then this is a brief overview of where I'm going with the talk, right? So we're going to start with the current political moment, where we're at right now. What is some of the rhetoric being used by politicians? How folks are talking about migrants and some of the policies and actions that we're seeing today. We will then transition to the current legal battle over birthright citizenship, which some of you all may have heard about. Then we'll get into the core of this, which is a historical overview of immigration policy. And then the last thing that I'll talk about, which is where I'll bring in the recent developments that we've had in our state, is shifting from the federal to the state and local level. And then at the very end, I'll leave some time open for Q&A. Sound good? Yes. All right. Let's do this. Anyone know who any of these individuals picture people are? Right? Okay. So this is a picture taken on October 3rd, 1965, at the base of the Statue of Liberty. The Johnson administration signed the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act, which, amongst other things, did away with the quota system as a basis for immigration to the U.S. And I'll talk about that here more in a minute. But I wanted to provide this picture because I think that symbols are important and they matter, right? The Statue of Liberty is one of those symbols that is always connected to immigration as a policy and as a general idea, right? So this is a different angle from that same day, right? So where I want to start at in talking about this is from the comments made by President Johnson in signing this bill. So here we see some language. Here we can see, for it does repair a very deep and painful flaw in the fabric of American justice, right? From his perspective, what Congress and his administration were doing was making a change that we can look at as fixing a stain on our history, right? So for a long period in our history from the 1800s, through this piece of legislation in 65, we had origin quota. So we only admitted a certain number of individuals from particular places, and the administration was saying this is not how things should be, right? We should make these changes. So fast forward to the present day, right? Anyone here familiar with the New Colossus poem? Right? So here you see this very often used, like, quote, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses that yearning to be free," right? That's very strong language, and that's something that individuals normally associate with the Statue of Liberty, right? Well, here's a variation of that. Right, this was several years back. "Give me your tired, your poor, who can stand on their own 2 feet," right? That's taking some liberty with that, right? And part of what we're going to talk about here today is how do we get from President Johnson's signing remarks to the current situation where we're in, right? It's a particular purpose as to why I'm bringing this in. So bear with me.
Hello, New York. Hello, Madison Square Garden. And hello to the United States of America, people watching in all 50 states. We are here tonight with a message for you. In 9 days, your rescue is coming. In 9 days, your salvation is at hand. In 9 days, folks, the games are gone. America is for Americans and Americans only. One man. And that man, ladies and gentlemen, that man took a bullet for you. He took a bullet for you. All we are asking in return, all we are asking in return is for 9 days. For 9 short, precious days. You have to vote, vote, vote. Vote for freedom, vote for liberty, vote for sovereignty, vote for your children, vote for your families, vote for the right of free speech, the right to the Second Amendment, vote for the right to have a secure...
Again, you get the point, right? The reason some of you all may have missed it, right, and trying to tune Mr. Miller out, right? But one of the things that was said there is America is for Americans, right?
Yeah.
And one of the core points that I hope to try to make today, so bear with me, I'm trying my best to try to make that clear, is that American society, and as a result, the American government, has time and time again fell victim to its baser instincts and chosen to ridicule, exclude, and attack groups that they view as too different, too unassimilable. Right now, it's seemingly the Hispanic population's turn at some of this like nasty talk and rhetoric, right? But one of the things I hope is clear at the end of this talk is that this is nothing new, right? So we have a particular group that's getting the brunt of this animus and nasty rhetoric, and in some cases attacks, right? As we think of the Texas Walmart shooting from 2019, right? And some things like that. But my core argument, or part of my core argument, is that this is the same, just insert a different group looking at a different time period, right?
Boney.
Thank you.
How well can you all see this in the back?
Not well.
Not well? Okay. I have mixed signals. But if we need to, we may turn off these lights up here. But this is from a poll from 2021 that's asking individuals what kinds of things they associate with being truly American, right?
No, the ones in front.
Yeah, we'll get to them eventually, right? It'll be fine. And this breaks it down across these different things that individuals mention by partisan affiliation, right? For those of you that can see, what are some things that stand out?
A lot of red on the right.
What's that? A lot of red on the right, yeah?
Being Christian.
Being Christian, yeah.
There's a lot of agreement on accepting people of diverse racial and religious
Sure.
backgrounds.
Yeah.
At least in
Yes, more than we might expect given some of the rhetoric, right?
Believing in God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else might we add to this? What do we think about whenever we think about, say, a prototypical American?
White.
All folks are created equal, yeah?
Different colors of skin.
Okay.
Christian country.
Christian country.
Helping each other.
Did you already say where this data came from?
So this is from the PRI American Value Survey from 2021. Yeah.
How big a survey was it?
I think it's about 1,200 folks, nationally representative sample.
It's interesting, the Western European heritage is at the very bottom.
Yes.
Not the difference there.
It's interesting that only 50% of Democrats believe that capitalism is the best economic system.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
think they forgot the Native Americans.
But that's part of like the underlying subtext in this talk, right? Like one of the things that I think we can look at different time periods as who gets to be viewed as American, who's welcomed into the forefront varies, right? We've had a lot of different migrant waves and we've had a lot of different groups that have received a less than a welcoming stance, I would argue.
The other one, so
Yeah?
the third one, accepting of people, diverse racial and religious backgrounds.
Yep.
That completely conflicts with
Being Christian, being
Sure.
Western.
down below, you
Yeah.
know, being born in America. And
Sure.
it's just like a very mixed
Yes.
signal.
That's fair. Yeah.
No.
Now, I can't definitively tell you who all is considered American, right? But based on the animus, the rhetoric, the policies, at different points in history, I can tell you who wasn't viewed as American or able to become American, right? Right now, and through different periods of our time, right, we have immigrants from Latin America, Caribbean countries, and those from the Middle East and China that are some of the folks that get negative attention their way, to put it lightly, right? Let's engage with this a little more, right? Let's fully contextualize the moment that we're at. Anyone familiar with what ASMR is?
Yes.
So there are some folks that listen to these like videos that would like have focus on sounds that different like textures and things do, right? Some people really buy into this. I won't show this here, but earlier this year, you had the official White House page post a video that did ASMR, took this very trendy thing of focusing on sounds and did it with deportation flights, right? And as you can see here, right, like this isn't just a random person, right? This is the official White House account. And then over here, do we know who this is? Yeah, right, do we see that? Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem.
We will hunt you down. I'm Kristi Noem, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. Thank you, President Donald J. Trump.
Is that better?
Yes. First. Let me deliver a message from President Trump to the world. If you are considering entering America illegally, don't even think about it. Let me be clear. If you come to our country and you break our laws, we will hunt you down. Criminals are not welcome in the United States. For too long, weak leadership has left our borders wide open.
You get the message, right? I'm not going to show all that. I promise there's a point to all of this, right? Anyone here a fan of Pokemon?
I wanna be the bear no one ever wants. Stand in my way, dreaming in my heart. I will travel across the lands, searching far and wide. Keep pushing my
I think some might look at it as such, but this is making a viral video, right? making this play on God catch them all with what Homeland Security and ICE and other Customs and Border Patrol, other entities within Homeland Security are doing, right?
It's indoctrination of children.
With children's cartoons.
Yeah, with children's cartoons, yeah. So again, I think more important here is one, it's being posted, right? So like this isn't new to like politics, right? Like this kind of content, right? Means that seems to be something that trying to reach particular folks or a tactic used in politics, right? But in this case, where the source that it's coming from, right? I think that is something that is different and concerning. But here, let's take something that isn't a meme, something a little more serious, and again,
nobody has any idea where these people are coming from, and we know they come from prisons, we know they come from mental institutions, insane asylums, we know they're terrorists. Nobody has ever seen anything like we're witnessing right now. It is a very sad thing for our country. It's poisoning the blood of our country. It's so bad, and people are coming in with disease. People are coming in with every possible thing that you could have.
So again, right, how do we get to this moment, right? This isn't an anomaly, right? That's kind of the argument that I'm making. And comments like that are not inconsequential, right? This is now, right, at the time was a candidate, but this is the leader of the so-called free world, right? It's not just some random person making these like comments, right? But again, here we see a survey from late last year. What do we notice here, team? What stands out?
Evangelicals.
It's a non-negligible subset of Americans that, at least at this point, seem to agree with this life stage, right?
But even 30% of Hispanic Protestants are Catholic.
Yes.
What was the
Exactly.
comment?
Just so sad.
What?
What was that comment?
It said even 30% of Hispanic Protestants
Yes.
and Catholics believe this.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
So President Trump was able to get north of 40% of the Hispanic vote, right? In the last election.
What was the date of this?
September, August 16th, September 2024.
Could be today.
Right, so the video that I have was one of the instances that President Trump said this, right? He said this again at a rally or in a different setting. This was during a sit-down interview, so it was a little cleaner without a lot of like background noise, right?
I hope today is a little bit.
Yeah.
Who knows?
So again, part of my core argument here today is that this is nothing new, right? Time and time again over the course of our history, we see nativism, right, which is this push or this wave of like anti-immigrant rhetoric and policies that come up. Time and time again, we see a push to control the boundary of what constitutes being an American, right? Time and time again, we see people being excluded because they don't quote unquote fit the bill of what some think, some Americans think residence on our soil entails, right? Anyone familiar with this guy?
Yeah.
All right, so like many of you have heard, maybe even without looking for it or any interest in the winner of New York City's recent mayoral race, right? This is Zoran Mamdani. His politics and those of New York City aren't particularly relevant for our conversation here today, but his background is, right? So Mr. Mamdani was born in Uganda, came to the US at the age of 7, and attained US citizenship in 2018. Still, some question his Americanness, quote unquote, and his allegiance to our nation, right? So here we have a sitting member of Congress, Representative Andy Ogles, looking to review or trying to get the government to review Mr. Mamdani's naturalization process, right? And writing a letter in his capacity as a member of Congress, right? to ask that his legal status and citizenship be questioned, right? Oh, sorry. There's something folks are still looking at?
Where's he from?
Uganda?
Tennessee.
Ogles.
Tennessee. Our neighbor. He's in Tennessee.
Yeah, not too far from us. But again, so in our laws, right, so for a long time, we've had different groups of individuals that are viewed as inadmissible under our laws, right? And in this case, the part of the argument being made here is that his allegiance to a different political system or ideology would be the grounds for revoking his citizenship.
When he was 7, probably wasn't. See that,
I get it, but this is, again, also important. Let's see, 46.
Mr. President, your beloved New York City.
You give us those numbers.
Yeah,
Well, that's what we should send them.
Yeah, when you, sometimes you say Florida, because they count Social Security. Mr. President, your beloved New York City. Your beloved New York City may well be led by a communist, Giovanny Pleites-Hernandez, who in his nomination speech said he will defy ICE and will not allow ICE to arrest criminal aliens in New York City. Your message to communist Giovanny Pleites-Hernandez.
Well, then we'll have to arrest him.
There's a real.
Look, we don't need a communist in this country, but if we have one, I'm going to be watching over him very carefully on behalf of the nation. We send him money, we send him all the things that he needs.
So this is, again, the president talking about looking into somebody that is in politics, right, for his views, right? Is this a viable threat? Well, we can sit around here and debate about that, right? There's a non-negligible number of individuals that are denaturalized and are stripped of their citizenship, right, or do away with it, right? But again, this point is to make that, like, not everyone who is a citizen under our laws and has gone through the process is actually viewed as American, right? Like, there are some individuals that live at the margins that have to consistently fight to be American, quote unquote, right? And then there's another subset of individuals, right? So this is my transition to talk about birthright citizenship. There's a vast majority of individuals that the way that they become American is solely through birth on this soil, right? And there's a smaller subset of that American population that has attained citizenship through naturalization. Here's President Trump at a naturalization ceremony in the late 2020. How we choose who gets to become a citizen is something that has changed significantly over the course of our history. Does anyone have any experience with that? Does anyone know what that process is for becoming American in the present day? What that looks like? Yes?
Yeah.
Would you care to share with us?
Sure. I'm an immigration attorney.
Okay.
So you want to talk about like here recently?
Yeah, so like generally, so somebody gets legal permanent status or comes here as an asylee, right? How does that individual get to full citizenship?
Oh, it's a very long.
Yes.
You're going to be a permanent resident.
Yes.
Depending on what category you are in for a resident.
Yes.
Anywhere from 3 to 5 years. Then you have to be a resident until you can apply to be a U.S. citizen. And depending on the processing time for a U.S. citizen, it was taking a year, now it's taking a little bit less time.
That's right.
Anywhere from 3 to 7 years for people.
Yes.
The whole.
Yeah, some individuals can get there quicker through like service and like spouses and all of that stuff, right? There's a different path to citizenship. This is the first iteration of the Naturalization Act. Yes. So this is the first time the legislature got involved and said, this is under our authority, and This is how we're going to determine who gets to become a citizen.
As long as they're free.
Free white. Free white.
Yes. Again, that checks out with that like time period, right? Term of 2 years. That's a bit lower than what the current time is
It says
now.
person instead of man.
Sure. That's right. But again, this is the first substantive law setting the parameters for becoming a U.S. citizen, right? This is the rest of it. What I want to draw attention to, right? This is the entirety of that piece of legislation. Right? Exactly. Right? Whenever we look at fast forward to 1952, I don't know how well you all can see that. 120 pages. What changed? Right? Well, the nation became more selective and developed more guidelines to coincide with the different changes that it was seeing, right? This piece.
Attorneys got involved.
Attorneys got involved, yeah. So again, here you see a lot of different definitions, but this is one of the key laws that were passed, right? Jurisdiction to naturalize, eligibility for naturalization, ineligibility, children born outside of the U.S., married persons, all of these other requirements, right? Again, the point I'm trying to make here is that in the present day, it's not so simple, right? It's a more time-consuming process and also more expensive. So again, we have this flow chart of sorts. But it's not as easy as it was in 1790, right? We won't talk about like the good moral character aspect, right? Like one of the things I was telling my wife on the way here, I teach an entire semester-long class on this, right? So like condensing it all into a 1-hour talk is difficult, but I'll restrain myself. Let's focus on the civics requirement.
Yes.
How many here can get all of these right? You all seem like you're pretty engaged and know what's going on. I mean, 6 out of 10 is needed to pass, right? Yeah.
I don't think most young people can.
No.
No, I can attest to that. So one of the classes I'm teaching at UNC Asheville this semester is Introduction to American Politics, which I look at as like a civics on steroids, right? Class. And to start the class, we have a variation of this. And this is just for me to get a sense for where the class is so I can adjust the content and what I'm teaching. And more often than not, the average is pretty low, right? Again, not everyone has the ability or desire to naturalize. This is the annual number of U.S. citizens from 1912 through 2022. And of those individuals that do choose to naturalize, right, or choose to go through that legal process, some are faced with significant backlogs. So we have a backlog for visas, but we also have a backlog in our immigration courts, right?
Yes.
Some people might have the means. You all may have heard of the gold card, right? No, a lot more than that. One proposal, there's a platinum version of this that was presented as $5 million, right? But this is the most recent one that appears on that government website.
Must one revoke the birth citizenship to be naturalized?
No. So again, so now let's shift back to this discussion of birthright citizenship.
About some of your other promises on this topic. You promised to end birthright citizenship on day one. Is that still your plan?
Yeah, absolutely.
The 14th Amendment, though, says that, quote, all persons born in the United States are citizens. Can you get around the 14th Amendment with
Well,
an
we're not
executive
going to
action?
change, we maybe have to go back to the people, but we have to end it. We're the only country that has it.
Through an executive action?
We're the only country that has it.
It's not true.
If somebody says a foot, it's just a foot, 1 foot, you don't need to put on it. Congratulations, you are now a citizen of the United States of America. Yes.
So again, yes, that's not true. It is very much Western, right, like North American thing.
And South America.
Yeah. So again, we're definitely not the only one, but we are an outlier compared to the other part of the world, right? What does this look like in other contexts? Well, let's look at how the French do things.
Can't really see this back there, so you might as well, can you walk through? Tell us the pertinent points.
Yeah, so in this case, you don't get it automatically, right? There's a process depending on the status of your parents or your adjustment of status whenever you reach adulthood, right? So in this case, we have some example, individuals being able to get nationality under particular conditions, right? Reside in France for 8 years. Again, so back to our situation. So President Trump did deliver on this. This is one of the many executive orders passed day one, right? And I mean, right now it's caught up in the legal process, right? So as of when I last checked, the Supreme Court still hasn't taken this up, right?
But it didn't go into effect.
No. So again, and the core issue here, or the argument being made here, is this clause subject to the jurisdiction thereof, right? So in essence, the legal case being made here is that anyone here that is not documented isn't actually under the jurisdiction of the U.S. government and the country, right? So therefore, those children that are born should not get citizenship. So again, whether this actually goes through, that is going to depend on how sensitive the court is to that argument, right? So again, the Dred Scott decision is one of the more infamous and landmark decisions in history, right? But whenever we do look at the text of the 14th Amendment, you see that here. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state where they reside, right? So again, that particular clause is what's at the heart of all of this debate. And we have some prior cases. So some proponents of birthright citizenship immediately go to the U.S. versus Wong Kim Ark, a case from 1898, and cite this Supreme Court decision as the end of this conversation, right? Clearly, it is not. If you have this case is making its way through like our federal court system and could be considered by the Supreme Court, right? So some say that this particular case has been wrongfully misinterpreted for a long time, or ever since its decision, because the parents had permanent domicile, right? So that isn't the same as parents right now that are here undocumented, right? But there wasn't an established process or requirements in the federal law at the time of this case, right? Indeed, the predecessor to the green card, the alien registration receipt card, wasn't materialized until the Alien Registration Act of 1940, right? So we don't see green cards in that liminal status until much later. Again, I had a few more slides in here on this, but it's ultimately going to come down to how the court views this. The federal government has petitioned and has asked the Supreme Court to add it on its emergency docket and speed through this like process, right? To get a decision sooner than later. Yeah, why does this matter? Well, there could be some individuals here in the not so far future that are born stateless, right? Does anyone have any sense for how many individuals currently reside in the U.S.? Yes, good. That's close, right? So these are a little bit dated. This is from 2022, right? We're still in that ballpark. Here we see the subset of the individuals broken down by nativity status, right? So we have north of 21 million, right, that aren't U.S. citizens, that have different statuses under our law, right? So whenever we break that down further, looking at the entire foreign-born population, a significant chunk are naturalized citizens. Others are in that in-between process where they could ultimately become naturalized citizens if they follow through on the residency requirements and actually apply for naturalization, right? And there's another subset that's unauthorized. So within that, we have asylum seekers, those individuals that fall under DACA, right, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and so forth. Yeah, currently we have the estimated undocumented population sitting at around 14 million. This population is not equally distributed across the U.S., right? We have different pockets and different concentrations. Here are some of the more numerous counties.
Well, then why are they in Charlotte?
We'll look at that briefly. So North Carolina is one of the top 10 states since 2000 that has seen a significant amount of growth in the Hispanic population, right? And within North Carolina, I believe it has the highest proportion, Mecklenburg County. Here we see the growth of that population right over time. We can see that since the late 60s, the non-European population has lessened as the share of the overall population, right? So again, here, the Mexican origin population makes up the largest individual group, right? So that's just an amalgamation of any other like nation that has a smaller chunk. So they didn't want this to be so hard to read, right? Like they're keying in on the top 10. So that would have a lot smaller slivers for these different nations, right?
North Carolina as a state is one of the fastest growing populations in the country.
Mhm.
So it only makes sense that there would be more migrants as well.
Okay. Yeah, we did get a seat after the last census, right? Reapportionment. Mhm. Yeah, so here we see the number of migrant admissions across time, right? So we see that there are lots of spikes across that time period, and we have different waves to fill that, right? So one of the things that I find interesting, not surprising after hearing you talk for the last little bit, is looking at this and looking into what those spikes were and tracking U.S. policy and focusing in particular how that has helped or hindered or not affected the growth in immigration, right? So whenever we look at these different time periods, right, so clearly we see, and we'll talk about it here in a minute, the 1917 Immigration Act and the Emergency Quota Act and its codification. This is what President Johnson was changing in 1965, right? These quotas that were set for particular nations. But we can see that, I mean, there are other things happening, right? We had wars in between that time period and economic downturns, but immigration policy is also one of the things that limited the number of individuals coming in. So again, here we come back to this question about being American, right? One we've been wrestling with as a nation from the get-go. And again, depending on the time period we're looking at, we have different answers to these questions. My contention, and probably one of you are getting tired of me saying, is this idea that this is nothing new, right? When things get tough, when a group gets too large, when persons are viewed as too different, we see nativism and xenophobia, right? This fear of others and fear of immigrants rear their heads, right? This is something we can see time and time again. We see it in the 1800s with both the Chinese population out west and the Irish and German populations on the East Coast and Midwest, right? We had this fear of Catholicism, right? Again, we can even go beyond or further back. This is Benjamin Franklin speaking on German migrants back in 1751. Right? Yes. 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 Now again, this is just one person, right? Sure, right? And that's why I'm listing it here. Here's another example. You may know him from the musical or the $10 bill, right? Our first Secretary of the Treasury. I get a lot of flack for this, but it wasn't until earlier this year that I finally saw Hamilton. A lot of my students are like, how, as a political scientist? I'm not a big fan of musicals, right? But here I'll draw your attention. We see a discussion, the influx of foreigners must therefore tend to produce a heterogeneous compound to change and corrupt the national spirit, right? So again, here we see this like language, right? Again, not every one of the framers or the founding fathers had the same ideas, right? But again, even if some of the influential individuals have these, that can have consequences, right? So this was President Washington, and Van der Kamp was a radical Dutch patriot that migrated to the U.S. eventually, right?
Sorry.
No worries. Here we have Thomas Jefferson in the first address to Congress. shall oppress humanity find no asylum on this globe, right? That has a different tenor from the other slides, right? But again, like, I don't want to pigeonhole or like mischaracterize the founding fathers or framers, right? My intent is only to show that these concerns about migrants and these anti-immigrant ideas, right, have been here for a while. So again, during the 1800s, as we got closer to the Civil War, we see a very clear anti-Irish, anti-German sentiment bubble up through the various places, states and localities, and then ultimately make its way into national policy. Has anyone heard of the Know Nothing Party? Yes. So the Native American or Know Nothing Party was a political party that was active to varying degrees in local, state, and national politics from the 1840s through the early 1860s, right? They didn't have the success that they might have liked at the national level, but they were able to get some representation in Congress and in a lot of state legislatures and positions there, right? And they were even able to get former President Millard Fillmore to run on their ticket, right? Even if he wasn't able to win. So unfortunately for them, the nation was dealing with a larger problem, in this case, the American Civil War, right? Still, their success, I would argue, shows that these ideas weren't viewed as outright radical or falling on deaf ears, right? And again, so here we see one example of a platform from Virginia. So I know this might be difficult to see, but part of what we see here is saying that they're determined to preserve our political institutions in their original purity and vigor, and to keep them unadulterated and unimpaired by foreign influence, either civil or religious, right? And part of what they also wanted was to change the time it would take for naturalization, right? We see that the message changed really quickly from wanting that very lax 2-year rule to wanting it changed. Let's fast forward a little bit. This is a World War II poster from 1942. And then in 1954, that's whenever we have mass deportations, right? So things changed pretty quickly.
How many millions of people were deported then?
I think some estimates have it around 1 million.
Okay.
And that was not just Mexican individuals that weren't, there were several citizens that were arrested or individuals that had naturalized or were born in the US.
Or fought in the war.
Yes,
They were deported.
that's right, yes, yes ma'am.
They called it. Citizens.
So like in this case, right, it feels like I'm trying to beat you over the head with this, but this, what we're seeing now is nothing new, right? This seems like forever ago politically, right? But we're not too far removed from this, right? Talking about particular migrants, hide your pets, right?
Have your daughters.
Yeah, right.
But in this case, you all, or I alluded to earlier, the Chinese Exclusion Act, right? Why did this law come about? So a little bit of context, right? The height of the gold rush, right, really ended in the mid-1850s. The first transcontinental railroad finished in 1869, right? So we had a significant chunk of Chinese migrants that were part of that effort, right? And clearly we see of that total migration, it increased in numbers, right? So what do we see? The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. right? Once things got hard economically, once that labor wasn't valued, once individuals were being viewed as having too large of a share in society, that's whenever we start seeing this anti-Chinese backlash, right?
Is that the other Gilded Age?
We can look at it that way, yeah.
The white man is on top.
So this piece of legislation made individuals inadmissible, right? And made, more importantly, those individuals that were already in the U.S. and eligible for naturalization. This was something that was updated and extended and remained in place until World War II, right? So again, right, a little more information. We also have the Immigration Act of 1882, which one of the things, it placed a head tax on every migrant, so the government started having a vested interest in trying to get funds to keep the administrative or the bureaucratic entity that was regulating this immigration open. But we also see that it established and developed this criteria for exclusion beyond nationality, right? So individuals deemed convicts, lunatics, idiots, or individuals likely to become a public charge would not be admitted.
Yeah, right.
What's that?
That's most of Congress.
Oh yes, and we also have polygamists, the deceased, and persons convicted of moral turpitude.
Well, that's
All right, no comments. But again, so one of the things that I'm trying to make clear here is that policies can have tangible consequences, right? So not always do laws passed by Congress or executive orders filed by the president have the expected outcomes, right? But in this case, we can pretty clearly see what this law passed, the impacts that it had, right? So this is supposed to show just how much this Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 impacted the growth and the Chinese population in the U.S. So here we can see across these different census periods, right, what proportion of a particular nation had a large chunk of individuals here in the U.S., right? And I've highlighted particular categories to show growth from the 1800s into the 1900s, right? Germany, Ireland, right? In this period, Asians and Eastern Europeans were deemed as undesirable, and policies were crafted to exclude them, right? This is one of the political cartoons from the period used to paint immigrants from Europe as undesirable, right? And this is something that reflects public opinion as we get closer to the 1917 iteration of the Immigration Act. So you see these different individuals have German socialist, Italian vagabond, Russian anarchist, English convict, and so forth, right? Mafia in New Orleans, anarchists in Chicago, socialists in New York, right? Well, this is zoomed in a little bit, that allows you to see it a little better. Irish pauper, right? What's that?
Italian African.
Vagabond. Yeah. So again, here we have another piece of legislation. Increase that head tax about $138 per individual in 2025, added more classes of individuals to a growing list of individuals that were viewed as undesirable. But it also created an immigrant commission to help the government develop immigration policy moving forward, right? So this is in part in response to these waves that we see in the 1800s. This group of individuals were part of what we now know as the Dillingham Commission, included members of Congress and other experts in the field that were tasked with helping investigate immigration at the time and help advise the government on policy. So for anyone that's interested, there was a talk, and I'll link it in the slides that you can look at if you're more interested in this. But you have this U.S. Congress Joint Commission on Immigration, also known as the Dillingham Commission, tasked with reporting to the federal government what to do with immigration. Over 40 volumes published. One core report was presented in 1911. So again, the core purpose of this commission was to tell the government what to do with immigration moving forward. Here we have some passages from this commission report. So I would argue that some of the individuals conducting the research and making these recommendations were wearing their own rose-colored glasses. They were also informed and influenced by this pseudoscientific and racist ideologies on the physiological hierarchy of races, right? Shortness and height of their heads, right? Pure blood. Yes, right? This was part of the report telling the government how to deal with immigration moving forward, right? Yeah. Also showing that there's concern about individuals assimilating to our politics, right? So this was legislators, professors, statisticians, individuals that were viewed as having expertise and authority, right? They said keep on the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. Something that parallels some of the discussions we're seeing today, right? This discussion of unskilled labor.
We're getting rid of our skilled labor.
Yeah.
Yes. They also said continue the head tax.
I assume the head tax is something the immigrant had to pay.
Yes. Or whoever was sponsoring them, right? So again, from that report, or from that commission, we see the Immigration Act of 1917, that amongst other things instituted a literacy test, and also codified the Asiatic barred zones to extend keeping out other individuals from that region of the world, right? Sorry, and I feel, as I do most of the time, the clock ticking on me. So let's fast forward a little bit, looking at a few years after that. The National Quota Law of 1921, also known as the Emergency Quota Law, which we saw earlier in the graph. So its purpose, as you see here, was to limit the number of migrants in any one given year to no more than 3% of the individuals that we already had residing here, based on the census of 1910. Let's take a look at the census of 1910. So if you look across, what individuals have a larger proportion of the population? Okay, certain Europeans, right?
So therefore, more of the same can come in.
Yes, this was very much designed with a particular purpose, right? So we saw that immigration or that emergency legislation codified and made more permanent a few years later. And then they went back to the 1890 census, right? So it was very much focused on limiting migration. But let's take a look at the breakdown. Based on what we see here, who were they looking to keep out? Yes. Yeah. Those vagabonds, right?
Yeah. They don't even consider it Africa, do they?
No.
South America.
So again, policies in some instances do have the desired impacts, right? All right. We see this again later. During World War II, you all may have heard of the Bracero program, and this is trying to import laborers, right? To fill a need that we had. Here we see some more specifics on this particular program. That's in 1942. In 1954, and this is a language that's used in official government documents of the time, right? This is from the LA Times, right? This is used in newspapers. This is, it wasn't uncommon. And again, here we see the push to deport individuals to Mexico by year. So from 1929 to 1937. Times get hard. We have to find somebody to target, right? Or a scapegoat. So some scholars look at this period as having this two-tiered admission process, right? For context, this is after Kristallnacht in December 1938, right? And it was children, right? So usually the elderly and children are viewed as different, and in public opinion polls and stuff are viewed more favorably than other adults, right? It should also be noted that things change quickly, right? But the infrastructure just could not keep up with the demand, right? So there's a lot of different factors, right? But one of those is the fact that the U.S. having concerns and not wanting to accept Jewish refugees, right? Fast forward a little bit to 1986.
Very pleased that you could all be here today. I know how busy you've been with events leading up to Tuesday's election, and I want to congratulate all of you in the House of Representatives who just been re-elected. This bill, the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986 that I'll sign in a few minutes, is the most comprehensive reform of our immigration laws since 1952.
It's the product of one of the longest and most difficult legislative undertakings in the last 3 Congresses. Further, it's an excellent example of a truly successful bipartisan effort. The administration and the allies of immigration reform on both sides of the Capitol and both sides of the aisle work together to accomplish these critically important reforms to control illegal immigration. In 1981, this administration...
So part of what we see here is putting more effort to criminalizing particular aspects, so like employing individuals that are undocumented, but we also see the very famous or infamous amnesty rate, so allowing up to like 3 million individuals to get their status adjusted, and a subset of that becoming citizens eventually, right? But that's the last time that we've had significant immigration reform or comprehensive immigration reform, right? It's before I was born, right? Just to date myself a little bit. But this is the current context that we're living in, right? So yes, we saw those policies crafted that limited migration, but we've also seen a significant growth since the mid-60s, right? So in this case, some of you all may or may not remember that one of the monikers given to President Obama was the Porter-in-Chief, right? Yeah. We see demonstrations during that administration. We see the start of these detention facilities. We see these family separations, right? That were exacerbated under the first Trump administration. We've seen Title 42. Does anyone remember what that is? Right? So that was a policy developed over COVID to use the pandemic as a pretext to not allow individuals to come in, right? That did away for due process for a significant number of individuals at the border.
Yeah.
There's at least one instance, right? And here we see that a significant amount of individuals were sent away. There were expulsions under Title 42, right? Title 8 is the standard process that gives individuals the right to make their claims for asylum and so forth, right? Title 42 said we don't have the capacity, we don't want our agents to get sick, so let's speed up this process. But this was something that was continued well into the Biden administration, right? One of the more recent developments we've seen is the big beautiful bill over the summer, right? Brought a significant amount of funds to ICE. This is a recruitment landing page for ICE. I mentioned before that, or showed this, the dispersion of the population. This is what that looks like in North Carolina, right? We have these pockets, so this superimposes not super neatly, right? I see that I messed up a little bit there. Now it's blown up, but this shows the different counties. So again, someone asked earlier why Charlotte. This explains some of that, right? U.S. immigration enforcement has long been the responsibility of the federal government. However, in recent times, we've seen several battles between the federal government and the states, and in some cases, with state governments trying to go over the head of the federal government to insert themselves more centrally in immigration policy. Some examples are seen here. Now, these didn't amount to anything, right? They both died, to my knowledge, in their respective chambers, in those state legislatures. But the fact that they were presented, I think, is concerning. And you all here are pretty familiar, right? So even before the North Carolina House Bill 10, we already had in Henderson County an agreement with the federal government and ICE to enforce, or help enforce immigration policy.
Jail, but not, not the public.
Yeah.
The police did not participate in serving warrants and
No.
that kind of.
Yeah, so we have different agreements. And again, Henderson County's not alone, right? Yes, that's right. Yeah, somewhere close to 30 in my head. I think you're right. So I'm just speeding up a little bit. Try to wrap this up.
What are these different support types?
So one has individuals that essentially is only call ICE and then they can figure out whether they want to come and like get that individual that has been apprehended. The other one trains and makes local sheriff's offices and officials quasi federal agents, or gives them a little more responsibility with enforcement, right?
Is that the jail enforcement?
No, that's warrant.
Yeah, the warrant service officer.
The jail enforcement is the one that Hendersonville and Henderson County participates in, and that's if somebody is arrested for anything and they might be not a citizen, that the county will hold them for a little longer and give ICE the opportunity to come and scoop them up.
Sure.
But that's very different from the local police officers acting in the capacity of ICE agents and
Yes.
serving warrants. And so Henderson County has actually been very good in terms of not doing that.
Okay, like that's a more involved thing, right? And then also like both of these like types of 287G programs rely on the resources of the locality that's cooperating with the government, right? So whenever you all were considering it here in 2019 or 2018, there were some fiscal considerations, right? And some talks about that with Sheriff Griffin.
There's no money there now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in this case, we have another example. We have also recent examples from Florida. Here, Governor Abbott from Texas was looking to institute fines and criminalize things under state law for immigration policy. This is something that for all of our history has been a largely federal thing, right? So we have this like, this is still in limbo. And it'll all depend on how the court chooses to address that, right? In the interest of time, I will go back to where I started. So here we have this passage from that legislation signed by President Johnson in 1965, but I want to show you a little bit more of that, of that speech or those comments. So here we see our beautiful nation was built by a nation of strangers from 100 different places or more. They have poured forth into an empty land, joining and blending in one mighty and irresistible tide. Now, under the monument which has welcomed so many to our shores, the American nation returns to the finest of its traditions today. All right, so this all brings me to my closing comments. My hope as an American is that, like what President Johnson saw from his vantage point as a president and at the base of the Statue of Liberty, that we lean into developing an immigration system that takes a more inclusive stance and welcomes migrants into our nation and political system and shows them what being American is all about. What it means to be American clearly has changed over the course of our history, right? For a significant time period, it meant only white males were deemed good enough to be allowed in and extended the rights and freedoms that come with citizenship. As I mentioned earlier, the welcomed, or better yet, unwelcomed group of people has shifted in response to demographic and economic changes. And though the Hispanic population is currently facing the brunt of this nativist moment, we know it too will pass, well, if history is any indicator of the future. To my earlier point, we've seen a lot of change, and we know that not all that have called this place a home have experienced it under the same conditions or from the same vantage points. Indeed, one of my favorite quotes comes from Rufus Miles, and it's, quote, "Where you stand depends on where you sit," end quote. I like it because it keys in on this idea that not everyone is similarly situated in our society, and as relevant to this conversation, some are closer to the immigrant experience and communities, and others are far removed from it. But all are impacted by the development and change in who we are as a society. So when I look at this passage, I think of all the people, experiences, and interactions that make up our society, and hope for an America where all are welcomed and treated like they belong. Because one thing that history has shown us is that exclusion and alienation have far-reaching and detrimental effects on both sides of that equation. Thank you for your time. All right. Yes, sir.
Doc, you know much more about immigration than I do. So I'm asking you,
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about the unregulated, massive immigration we've experienced recently coming across the southern border, and how this impacts American thinking?
Okay.
Because there's a tremendous amount of scared propaganda about that.
Sure.
But some of it has a merit. A conservative point of view has a merit, a liberal point of view has a merit. Thinking these things through just with your head,
Sure.
or just with your heart, doesn't work either.
Yeah.
You have to put a sensible formula together.
Okay.
So I'm sorry I'm taking too much time with this question. So I'm saying, can you please talk a little bit about
Sure, yeah.
About this recent unregulated, mess that has occurred during the previous administration.
Sure.
I call it quite a mess.
I don't know that we view the numbers the same, right? I would follow with you at least on the point that there was a significant spike under the previous administration, but we did see that for much of that administration, we still had Title 42, which, as we saw from the numbers, turned a lot of individuals away, right? We also had other developments trying to make it more accessible through legal means, right? So we have the CDB One app, which had its own issues, right? So again, I don't know if I would buy that characterization that it was completely open borders, right, under the Biden administration, right? Indeed, one of the things that I tell my students in the classes, right, they come in with these preconceptions based on the talking points that they hear over and over again, but both parties, to varying degrees, have targeted and deported migrant communities, right? And that's also true under the Biden administration.
So if you don't know who came in, what their names are, where they came from, what their background is, and indiscriminately just say, okay, come.
Nobody ever said that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We don't agree on that same characterization. I agree that unregulated immigration is a concern, right? But I don't see that happening under the previous administration, where it was just opening the gate and letting the floodgates through, right? That's where we see different. We can look at the same numbers, right? I'm not reading it the same as you are, sir. Yes?
With the reform that almost had the bipartisan in
Yes.
the last administration, and it was stopped by one person.
Yes.
Yes.
How, so that was a really important bipartisan.
Yes.
How much would that have did it affect on everything?
Yeah, so we've had several attempts in the last couple of decades, right? Yeah, that was very close, right? So the last time previous to this recent iteration that we saw it happen was in 2014 with Senate Bill 744 that had a group of about 8 senators. Senator Lindsey Graham from down the road was one of the individuals that was part of that. Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, right? We're all vested in trying to make this happen. This iteration was like some recent iterations, right? We also saw it in 2005 with the Sensenbrenner bill that led to those demonstrations, the 2006 protests. But all of these bills, one of the things that they've had in common is that there's been an effort to secure the border first, right? So like that is one of the things that the Republican side of the aisle says, we cannot agree or move forward with policy until we put a lot of funding to securing the border. And one of the sticking points in contemporary politics has been what to do with the 11 million to 14 million undocumented individuals that are already here, right? So yes, that would have significantly changed things. But again, for some, that's a poison pill, right? Some view that as rewarding individuals that have been here illegally and didn't go through the proper process, right?
We have like a hard stop at 6:30 or because the library will need to clean up, and I think we have time for one more question.
And I'm sorry, I'll go back to my email. I'm happy to talk with anyone, have a one-to-one or communicate via email.
Well, thank you very much. We must appreciate having a whole class, a whole semester in one. That was a phenomenal experience.